Try HelloFresh UK to get 60% off your first box, 25% off for 2 months, and to of course help support this channel. Link is down in the description. Thank you for your support. Well, after another bonkers weekend of championship action, we are back straight away for Matchday 18. We're going to go through all 12 games taking place on Tuesday and Wednesday night next week and give our score predictions and the reasons why we're hopefully doing better than we did at the weekend. We'll also have a quick recap of last week's scores, so as always, I'll encourage you to get your predictions down in the comments, and if you beat or match my score, you will get a shout out in the next recap on Thursday, ahead of the weekend fixture list at the end of a 3-game week. But firstly, before we go and look ahead to the 12 midweek fixtures, let's have a look back at Matchday 17. And I'm a very angry man because somehow I only managed to get 5 points. There were a few outcomes that, based on the games, were almost hard to believe. We'll get to them later on. I did manage one perfect score for Leicester v Watford, and to be honest, because there were so many surprise outcomes, there were very few people. In fact, I think only 2 who got more than 6 of the outcomes right. For most people, it was those who got the perfect scores at the top of the table, and a load of us at the bottom who didn't get many, who were stuck down on 3, 4, 5 or 6 points. So that for me was a frustrating match day, not to mention the Preston Cardiff game where I was having the perfect score after 95 minutes and somehow ended up with a completely wrong outcome. But let's have a look at the 8 of you who did beat or match my score. We'll go in reverse order and start with Mello, who was level with me on 5 points, also with the perfect score for Leicester as well. Peter just pipped us to the post with 6, Mitchell with 7, Patrick came in and got 8 as well. Steve joined him there, a regular consistent performer near the top of the table. Alex on 9 points, a good effort from you, but 2 in double figures. West Brom fan, BPK, 12 points for you, an excellent call and a perfect score on your West Brom team as well. And then RZL, top of the tree, you can only say well done. 14 points on a match day like that with 3 perfect scores is an incredible effort. So well done, you are the winner of match day 17. But now we turn our attention straight to match day 18 because the championship comes thick and fast. We begin on Tuesday night with Cardiff City versus West Brom. Cardiff, the side that ruined a perfect score for me very late on at Preston. West Brom, very good in the evening game against Ipswich to get the 2-0 win. To be honest, they did cause a threat on the counter. Some of the Ipswich defending wasn't ideal, and they had 1 or 2 other great chances as well. But West Brom will be thrilled with the way they're going at the minute. 4 wins in 5, and the only game they didn't was that frustrating one at Southampton where they created chances. And again, the problem for them is taking them regularly. But to restrict Ipswich to no shots on target, to have a constant threat on the counter, I thought they played really efficiently and again, looked like a Carlos Corberán team. And I'm starting to think will be pretty much shoo-ins for the playoffs the way they're going. The Cardiff game was just bonkers. 1-0 down after 95 minutes, struggling to break down 10-man Preston. I mean, they dominated the game both before and after the red card in terms of chances. Dominated the ball, really front-footed, but just could not find a breakthrough. It was almost turning into a classic Preston win. But Cardiff, they did it. They kept going till the end. And 2 goals in the 96th and 99th minute were enough to get them the victory. So you've got to say well done for going to the end. Cardiff, for me, have been the biggest surprise of the championship season. They've been absolutely brilliant. And to keep going like that to get the win, as much as it ruined my predictions weekend, you've got to give them big credit. For this game, though, I see 2 teams that are in pretty confident form. If you go back to Cardiff before the Preston and Norwich games, it was 3 clean sheets in a row. West Brom are fairly mean defensively, but don't always take chances. So I'm going to start by sitting on the fence. I didn't get them in enough at the weekend. And actually, it's the only one I've gone for this midweek. I'm going for the Championship's favourite scoreline of 1-1. Let's move on to probably the 2 standout performances of the weekend for me. It is Coventry City versus Plymouth Argyle. Coventry went and won 3-0 at Millwall to ruin Joe Edwards' perfect start. And Plymouth with a 2-0 win at home to Sunderland. I'm not quite sure how they kept a rare clean sheet though, because Sunderland did have a lot of the game, over twice the chances and on target, had a couple of good opportunities as well, and the majority of the ball, but Plymouth, resolute defensively, something we don't often say about them. They made the most of their physical advantage in certain situations, And the couple of goals they scored on a counter-attack, you've got to give them credit. I liken it a bit to my team Luton in the Premier League. Those flowing counter-attacks, making the most of the ball when you've got them, is a very important part of the game. And for Plymouth, it's a very big win to keep daylight from the bottom three. So they'll be delighted with their 3 points. For Coventry, that's what we've been missing. A threat on the counter. They took advantage. And to be fair, Millwall had most of the ball. They had plenty of shots, but a lot of them either from distance or from difficult angles. For Coventry, 11 shots, 9 on target. They were ruthless. They created great opportunities on the counter. And actually, you could say the manner of goals from both sides, very similar. So definitely a big sign for Mark Robins. And it's only 9 points to the playoffs. They started worse last year. Don't rule them out just yet. I think given Plymouth's poor away form this season and the fact they've only picked up 3 draws on the road, it is going to be one of 2 outcomes. Now, you could say draw because Coventry have drawn 5 of their 8 home games, but they've only lost 1. And I think they're going to start finding form now. They are vulnerable to the counter themselves, so I'm not going to go for a clean sheet, but I'm going to go for them to pip Plymouth in this one, and I'm going to go for Coventry by 2-1. Next up, we move to Yorkshire for Hull City versus Rotherham United, and this game features 2 sides that both picked up draws in the weekend, both of them coming from behind as well. Hull were 2 down at Swansea after 25 minutes, a goalkeeping error involved in that as well. But the second half, they were very good. They played well, actually, and they continued what has been a decent away record for the most part of this year. They've been impressive under Liam Rossini. They're an outside chance at the playoffs at the minute. And you look at the way they're playing, and you just think if they can be clinical regularly, they've got a real chance. But defensively, need a bit of an improvement after that game. On the flip side of that, Rotherham were absolutely battered by Leeds in the first half. I've no idea how they got to the 45-minute mark only 1-0 down. And Hakeem Adofin popped up with a pretty smart finish, it must be said. But I'll never know how they got a draw out of it. They had none of the ball, they had very few of the chances. And they did have a couple of breakaways, which they didn't make the most of late on. But Leeds should have been 3 or 4 up. And again, Rotherham just so open defensively. For this game, though, we know how bad Rotherham are away from home. The only side to concede 21 goals on the road. And the only side, with Sheffield Wednesday, to be on 1 point on the road all season. So you've got to go for Hull to win. It's about being clinical. But Rotherham, they've not just been beaten, they've been battered on the road most times. So I'm going to go for Hull to win comfortably. I'm going to go by 3-0. Let's move on to 2 sides that were disappointed at the weekend. It is Middlesbrough versus Preston North End. We mentioned Preston already. The red card to Robbie Brady followed by 2 very late hammer blows by Cardiff City. Let's be fair. Preston were second best for the vast majority of the game, both with 11 and with 10. We mentioned it actually in the last predictions, didn't we? They so rarely dominate a game, and it must be hard being constantly under pressure. I do feel like there's got to be a slight change in style. I know they're up in 6th place, but you just can't see it being sustained. That is largely due to their brilliant start, and now they are really struggling to put a consistent run together. For Middlesbrough, disappointing at Bristol City. Concede 3 against a side that haven't been that consistent in front of goal, and a Liam Manning side that drew 0-0 with very few chances the week before. It has got to be disappointing. Ironically, there were a few good goals in this game. There weren't that many clear-cut chances, but Middlesbrough just didn't make the most of the ball, didn't create quite as much as we're often used to them seeing, and their attacking players at the moment, unlike last year, are a little bit hit and miss. So, just a frustrating day for Borough defensively. Back to what we'd seen towards the start of the season. Whereas in this one, they're going to have to be tight because we know that Preston aren't going to give up too much. I say that Preston haven't kept a clean sheet in their last 6, but they're going to come here with one game plan in mind. I think Preston are going to sit behind the ball away from home and they're going to try and play for a 0-0, and Borough are going to have to try and break them down. Because Preston ruined my weekend in terms of the perfect score, I'm going to go for Borough to nick it. I think it'll take a long time. It'll be a second half goal. It'll be a boring one by 1-0. Let's move on to another game that doesn't really promise goals. It is QPR versus Stoke City. Both sides drew a blank at the weekend in defeats. QPR losing 1-0 away at Norwich. Stoke getting hammered by Blackburn 3-0 at home. It is now 3 games without a goal for Stoke, 2 without a goal for QPR. And Marti Cifuentes is having a tough start to life in London. QPR not showing a regular goal threat, albeit they conceded the only shot on target from Norwich. They had a lot of the ball. The clear change of style was evident, but they're not really creating many clear openings, and that has been the case throughout a number of games. No real creative spark against Bristol City, again the same against Norwich, and even away at Rotherham, a better performance, but it wasn't chances galore. It was better ball retention, it was less pressure on the defence, which is reflected in their defensive record, but not good enough going forward. Stoke, well, I just give up. Looked like the team of the season for 3 weeks after Alex Neil was under pressure. Now they can't score a goal for love nor money. Against Blackburn Rovers, they actually did pretty well to contain them for the most part, because Blackburn are usually a side that create 15-20 chances a game. In this one, they only had 7 shots, but the manner of the chances they gave away, there were great opportunities on the counter. Stoke only managed 1 shot on target themselves. So you look at the 2 games, you think, this is going to be 2 sides that will keep the ball well, but where on earth are the goals coming from? And I know we could get proven wrong, I know we could look silly, but statistically, if you look to the build-up of this game, you have to go for 0-0. There's every chance it will be wrong, but there is no alternative from a common sense point of view than to say it's going to be QPR 0, Stoke City 0. As we move on to the final game on Tuesday night, the TV game between Watford and Norwich City. Watford beaten 2-0 at Leicester City, including a late red card for their goalkeeper Daniel Bachmann. It was pretty much as we expected, to be honest. We said that Watford would go to their cautious game plan, they would revert to their away style under Ishmael, and Leicester dominated the game. It felt like a matter of time. Watford did create 1 good chance and possibly should have scored, but it would have been a bit of a smash and grab. Leicester were definitely the better team. No shame in that, they're the best team in the division, but for Watford, they're going to have to be a bit more inventive and a bit more front-footed in this game. And we've seen their goal record this season. It has largely been their weakness. They've had a couple of games that have sort of distorted the record, like the opening day and like Rotherham at home. But other than that, there has been a bit of a drying up in front of goal, particularly at home. For Norwich, a 1-0 win against QPR with their only shot on target. A miracle that Norwich City have kept a clean sheet with one of the worst defensive records in the league. Only beaten by Rotherham's worst one now. But they got a 1-0 win. They're winning ugly and they're doing what they have to do. They're moving back up to mid-table, just 5 points off the playoffs now. And you do feel that David Wagner, after being under pressure, is finding something. They're going to have to be better defensively against Watford, who won't give up that many chances. I can see this being a pretty dull game as well. I'll be honest with you, I spent about half an hour this morning flicking between 1-0 to Norwich and 1-0 to Watford. In the end, I'm going for 1-0 to the host, Watford. If it does end up being 1-0 Norwich, I'll feel absolutely sick, but I'm going for 1-0 Watford. Proof I'm not biased. Let's move on to Wednesday night, and we start with a big game between Blackburn Rovers and Birmingham City. Blackburn, brilliant away at Stoke with a 3-0 win. 2 very good away performances in a row, actually. And Birmingham finally got their first win under Wayne Rooney. But it wasn't all that convincing, was it? They beat Sheffield Wednesday by 2-1 in what I would say from the extended highlights was a fairly even game. The stats for the match would suggest the same as well. Similar on pretty much everything across the board. It wasn't a convincing performance, and considering the no-fear attacking style of football he was going to bring, I would argue it would have been more entertaining to watch a John Eustace team based on his final 2 home games in charge. Against a Blackburn team who create chances galore and create good chances in every match, there is one thing that's guaranteed as well. Birmingham will have to be a lot better defensively. They've conceded in every game since Wayne Rooney joined. They've conceded 2 or more on 4 of those 6 occasions. Blackburn, they do offer up opportunities. They do waste a lot of chances, but they are a very good side. And while they've not been as good at home as we've sometimes seen in the past, their home record actually 4th worst in the division, but no draws. It's wins or defeats. And they've won 3 of them. I think they're going to make it 4 here. I still feel that Wayne Rooney is yet to convince at Birmingham. I wasn't that encouraged by the performance. So I'm going to go for Blackburn to win, and I'm going to go comfortable. I'm going to go 3-1 for the hosts. As we move on to Leeds United versus Swansea City. Leeds will be wondering how they didn't win, how the game wasn't wrapped up well before the equaliser on a stroke of half-time against Rotherham. 3 successive wins before, but the goals had been harder to come by. And I just don't know how they didn't take them. They had some great chances. They played pretty well. And in the end, 1 poor bit of defending, 1 moment of switching off. And they ended up frustrated by Rotherham in the second half. So a disappointing day for them. And of course, with the Ipswich result that followed as well, they could have been even closer to the top 2. But for Swansea City, more frustration. Didn't play that well, but went 2-0 up against Hull. And you're always going to be disappointed if you throw away a 2-goal lead. At half-time, they would have been comfortable with the score. They kept the ball pretty well in the first half, I have to say that. But in the second, maybe got caught out a little more. On the counter, struggled, gave away a few chances. They didn't do enough to stop crosses into the box. They didn't do enough to stop counters. And it's kind of reflected in corner stats. Swansea concede very few corners. They did again in that game too, because they just allow balls into the box a bit easily, which is why at times they've had poorer defensive displays. There's 5 goals conceded in the last 2, but they've still got a goal threat. They're still doing okay. This one is going to be tricky though. We've seen at times Leeds can be frustrated and have the odd poor day in front of goal. But based on normal form, if they're at it, I think they will win this game. I'm not going to go for a big scoreline because Leeds haven't been ruthless enough at times. They've got a few problems in fullback areas, etc. I'm going to go for Leeds to nick it by 2-1. And I think put pressure on the top 2, particularly Ipswich Town. Speaking of the top 2 though, we move on to what will be a lot of people's banker this midweek. It is top versus bottom as Leicester City travel to bottom side Sheffield Wednesday. Wednesday actually played a bit better against Birmingham. It was a fairly even game and they had to improve after that performance against Millwall. But in the end, it's the same outcome. It's another defeat. 10 points adrift now. It's looking very, very poor for them. And this is why we predicted them bottom in pre-season. They wasted a lot of the summer. And Danny Roll is now going to need an absolute miracle in January. For Leicester, back to winning ways after back-to-back defeats. A comfortable one against Watford. They were frustrated for the most part, but in the end, Jamie Vardy off the bench to break them down. And of course, the late second made it look more comfortable than it was. A clean sheet was important after conceding in 3 in a row. And now, coming up against another side in the bottom half of the table, they'll be expecting to get a result. Sheffield Wednesday still only won the 1 game at home to another side in the bottom 3. I mean, the Championship does funny things. There's every chance they could nick a 1-0 here. They might be up for it. The fans won't be expectant. There'll be less pressure. But given Sheffield Wednesday's attacking record, given the way Leicester have played on the road against teams that are poorer defensively, I have to go for a comfortable away win. I'm going to go for 3-0 to Leicester City. But the Championship does funny things. So who's going to be brave enough to predict a Sheffield Wednesday win in the comments? Let's move on to the final 3 as Southampton host Bristol City. Southampton frustrated by Huddersfield in a 1-1 draw. A return to some of the early season Russell Martin performances. Whereas Bristol City got a fabulous win against Borough. Make it 7 points out of 9. And a big win for Liam Manning. Not the most typical performance from his side. Only just over 40% of the ball. But ruthless on the counter-attack. Creating opportunities. And defended fairly solidly from set pieces at times. But considering the game, it's not going to be the sort of performance that makes you think, right, Bristol City are away now. We mentioned it before with Bristol City over a number of years on this channel. They throw away points from winning positions, and he almost did the same. From 2-0 up at half-time to be back at 2-2 after 7 minutes of the second half, it's not really ideal. Yes, they came out and got the win up, fair play to them, but you're not going to get away with that every time. And after 2 clean sheets in a row, albeit against the bottom 2, they'll probably be quite disappointed with that defensive display. For Southampton, we knew what Huddersfield's game plan was going to be because they were so limited with players, they just had to try and stay in the game. For Southampton, they just didn't break it down enough. Yes, they had a couple of great chances and on another day they would have scored them. They dominated the ball. They didn't create enough great opportunities from that situation. And while Huddersfield rode their luck a couple of times, to give away a late goal and not get the 3 points against a side that can't name a full bench at the minute, it's not really an ideal outcome. This game's going to be really tricky to predict. You don't know what's going to happen with Bristol City here because Liam Manning does generally like to keep the ball with his sides, but Southampton again are going to dominate possession here. They've kept the unbeaten run going, but they're not ruthless enough regularly. I'm going to go for them to nick this game, but there was so much of me that wanted to go for a 1-1 draw. In the end, no, I've gone for Southampton to nick it 2-1. And it could be another one that leaves me tearing my hair out. As we move on to the final 2, it is the side that drew with Southampton as Huddersfield Town travelled to Sunderland. And Sunderland were disappointed at the weekend. A 2-0 defeat at Plymouth gave away a couple of poor goals on the counter. Really struggled with some of the physical elements of Plymouth's game. And just weren't clinical enough. The centre-forward position is a problem for them. They've not got a fluent goal scorer in that attacking role. They've been reliant on Jack Clark. And unfortunately, it's not working out so well on days like that. But the performance wasn't appalling, so I'm sure they'll bounce back. And if you look at their last 2 home performances, they've been very comfortable in both. For Huddersfield, you've just got to give massive credit. Darren Moore, forget your Premier League size moaning about injuries. Darren Moore has had proper problems. up to 7 substitutes this weekend and managed to change shape and style to what he would often like to do. But again, a bit like the whole game, they surrendered possession, they surrendered territory, and he just tried to stay in the game. This is not the Huddersfield side we're going to see long term under Darren Moore, but at the moment needs must, and it's a great point in the end. We mentioned it a few minutes ago on the Southampton side. Yes, they rode their luck a bit. Yes, they gave up a few chances, but you know what? They stayed in the game and they showed great spirit late on. So well done to them for getting a point. It's going to be a very tough trip to Sunderland, and to be honest, I don't see them getting a result out of it. I'm going to go for Sunderland to nick it. I think Huddersfield will try and frustrate them. In the end, they will be penetrated. It will be a 1-0 win for the Mackhams. And the final game on Wednesday night is Ipswich Town versus Millwall. Two sides that had a very disappointing weekend. And for Joe Edwards, if he thought the Championship was easy after a trip to Sheffield Wednesday, well, he'll feel very differently now, won't he? Coventry refound their form against them. A 3-0 home defeat in his opening home game. Not an ideal situation. Too open on the counter-attack. Great that Millwall are trying to adjust their style, keep the ball a bit better, try and push forward in possession. But he didn't create that many great openings. Had one glorious opportunity. He had 20 shots, but yes, a lot of them were from distance. A lot of them were from set pieces. There weren't really a great number of times where they carved Coventry open. And on the counter-attack, it was very much the opposite at the other end. So a few causes for concern there, and definitely going to need to rethink things after that match. But for Ipswich, a side at home who are always entertaining, well, they failed to be that on the road this time. No shots on target at West Brom. Actually, a little bit disappointed watching them, particularly the way they defended wide areas. It wasn't ideal. And I think obviously the biggest concern at the moment is they've conceded 2 or more in all of their last 6 games in all competitions. They've been very poor defensively at times, and they're starting to get done in wide areas. It's like teams have found patterns to get through them. For Millwall, they're going to try and play the same way on the counter away from home. I do think this is going to be a more end-to-end game than we expect. And I'm not sure who's going to win the battle of possession. But at home, I'm going to bank on Ipswich to win. Millwall, very unconvincing at the weekend. Still too early to confidently predict how Joe Edwards is going to set up. But I'm going to go for Ipswich to get back to winning ways, and to do so by 3-1. So with that out of the way, let's have a recap of what I've gone for in Matchday 18. I guess the final game was a pretty big one. So I've gone for Ipswich to score 3, as well as Blackburn and Leicester City, and Hull City as well. I've gone for a Championship's favourite scoreline in the opening game between Cardiff and West Brom, and a bold 0-0, or maybe not so bold, between QPR and Stoke City, the game to avoid of midweek. But those are just my predictions. Do you agree or disagree with them? Let me know yours down in the comment section as well. If you beat or match my score, remember, you will get a shout out in a recap on Thursday as we look ahead to Matchday 19 at the weekend. It's also an FA Cup weekend, so a great time for football. I hope you're looking forward to all of that too. We'll be back on Wednesday in the meantime with our Premier League preview for Brentford versus Luton, as well as all of our predictions over there as well. But if you enjoyed this one, please do chuck a thumbs up on the video, subscribe and turn the notification bell on to make sure you don't miss any of what I've just mentioned. And of course, thank you for watching as always. Thank you to HelloFresh for the support. If you're in the UK, 60% off your first box in the link in the description. And I'll see you back here on Thursday for another week of Championship predictions.